One of the things that I love is that two films idea of your life. And there's like two stories you can tell. One that is safe and full of regret, and one that is risky and full of pride and joy.
Hello everybody. So I'm Ian, and that was me playing the drums in that band. I hope you all enjoyed it. How many people here know of the band Kasabian? Cool, wicked. So I did this. I did the adult, the normal do lectures. I think it was last month, wasn't it? Beginning of last month, and it went so well that I was asked back again. So which isn't a bad thing. I thought what I'd do today is talk to you a bit about where I come from and a little bit about the lead up to a moment like that, really. Obviously, I was a young drummer, and I was about 19. I was a teenager, and I realised that I'd been playing drums since I was a kid, and I'd a big passion for it. I'd never really realised, actually, through going through school and then leaving school and taking up normal real-world jobs, that I could put the two and two together and take what is my passion, what is, I guess, a hobby, or albeit a hobby that I was being paid to do. Even through school, I was doing paid work. I was doing wedding gigs, function gigs, theatre stuff, playing in the pit band for various theatre productions, including some professional ones as well, in Bristol. And but I'd come through school and I'd got into I'm from a working class background, I'm from a normal background, and you kind of you do your school thing and then you kind of go and look for a job. And nowadays it's a little different. There's, I guess, more emphasis on further education and stuff, which is brilliant. But in my case, I left school and I realised I was kind of deeply unhappy. There was something missing, I guess, in my life. And I was about 19, and I sort of came to my senses and realised that I should do something that I'm the most passionate about. It wasn't necessarily an easy thing to do. Luckily, Bristol, where I'm from, is a buoyant city. It's got a really good, or at that time, it's got a really good, healthy music scene. And so there was possibilities on my doorstep, but nothing big, no grand scheme, no grand plans. I just wanted to be able to live from and pay my way in life from doing what I wanted, what my passion was. And the day I made that decision, the day I left my normal job, I was working for Parsaforce at the time, was the best decision I made in my life. And it sent me on a new trajectory. That wasn't the plan, the idea of stardom in a great big band headlining Glastonbury and all that kind of thing wasn't in my grand plan. It wasn't like an all or nothing thing. It was just simply, why am I staring out of the office window every day dreaming about playing drums? And so that's what I did. And as I say, I've never looked back since. And that's something I would say to all of you, really. Look within yourself, work out what it is that you love doing, because even though that might be the path of most resistance, because a lot of the things like being a musician is a really hard game to be in, being an artist or an actor or a dancer or, all those kind of professions are really tough. Very often when you're working, particularly on a local scene, they're not well paid. It's not brilliant, in many ways, but at the same time, it's the most brilliant thing, because at the end of the day, despite the travel and despite, all the other things that go on, you get to the point where you're doing what you love doing. And if you can do what you love doing as your job, then you never work, particularly in a day, you never work a day, if you know what I mean. So I made that decision, and I realised that obviously in Bristol, as I said, there's a buoyant music scene there. There's a lot of unknown, not superstar musicians, but of a very high level. And so I had to work harder than I ever had worked before to put myself onto that level where I could compete. Even for what it was then a £30 bar gig, the amount of people, the amount of competition around that. But that spurred me on even more. And I found myself having been, you know, a kid, having drum lessons and doing gigs and stuff. I mean, I did my first paid gig when I was 7 years old. My dad was a musician, and I used to go out playing with my dad. And I used to run a little band, you know, like a weekend band really, playing in sort of pubs and playing for weddings and whatever have you. But I maybe not had the right attitude towards practice. It was a thing, you know, I had to do, not necessarily wanted to do, although I wanted to play the drums. But the practice was the work side. I suddenly found myself completely motivated to work and work and work, and I found myself doing the hours of practice and seeking out new drum teachers just to get onto the next technique to kind of up my game. And thankfully, I got to a position where I was able to compete, even just in Bristol. And it was amazing, you know, I'd done it, I'd done the transformation. Then at that point, new things open up. So I'd probably been a pro, as it were, for about a year. I mean, luckily with Bristol, I was brought up there, so I'd already had lots of musician mates who were also doing the same thing as me. So we could kind of come up through the scene together. But then suddenly I was asked by a friend, would I go to a junior school? He was teaching at the schools, the local schools for the county, and he was going to do a jazz workshop for an assembly. And would I go along, because he was going to put a band together, and then we would play in front of the kids, and then after each tune we would stop and we would explain what we were doing, what our different instruments represented, how we were listening to each other. And of course the little moment came for the drum solo, and the kids went crazy. And then I got asked back by the headmaster a week later saying that it all kicked off, all the kids want drum lessons now, would I come and teach? So now I've moved into something completely different. I wouldn't never have expected. Now I'm what they call a peripatetic drum teacher, going to a school to teach the kids, you know, how to play drums, and that was a new experience for me. Eventually, after doing that for an academic year, the headmaster sort of turned around and said, well, that was a success. Would you like me to recommend you to the county? It means you won't get as much money per se, because I was obviously teaching kind of semi-privately at the school, but I would get involved with the county, and they would pay me, but I would get more work. So I landed up, after a few years of being with the county, I had 6 schools on my books, and I was travelling around Bristol teaching kids, including my old school as well. That was a completely new experience, and it's one that's, again, given me so much. I mean, I couldn't be doing this now if I don't think if I have not been exposed to having to teach. As a drummer, is, you know, as you can see, you know, even playing in front of, that was over 100,000 people, but I'm kind of at the back of the stage with my drums, and I leave it to the lead singers to do the chatting and all the rest of it. But so there's a constant knock-on effect. Now with the music side, I mean, I was about 19. I spent my 20s, you know, knocking around Bristol, teaching and playing, doing more and more playing. And eventually I started to get to know a lot of the sound engineers who ran the studios around Bristol. And I'd been advised a lot by friends and people in the music business to smile through the politics, be awesome, be a nice person to work with, and always turn up on time, and don't get your books mixed up, your dates mixed up. And I managed to get to a point where I had the trust of not only musicians but also of the sound engineers who ran their studios around Bristol, until one day a friend of mine gave me a call and said, I got this band from Leicester coming down to record in our studio. I was like, yeah, okay, cool. He goes, I think it will suit you down to the ground. And so I turned up to the studio, and that was the first time I met those boys there. So it's like, then they weren't a signed band. It wasn't like, you know, a big thing. It was just these guys were doing the same thing, coming in the opposite direction from another city. They were much younger than me. They're 10 years younger than me. They were at that point. Some of those guys were only about 19. Tom, I think, was 19. I think Serge was 20. So they were in a similar position to what I was 10 years before. And they'd, as a band in Leicester, had managed to find themselves a development manager in London, who got them some money from somebody that I've never found out who, but I think it was someone a little bit dodgy. Because they paid them off straight away when they got signed, and so I did my first session with those boys for £100. In fact, I got £20 extra from the manager as a tip. And that first session I did with them in Bristol was actually a couple of the tunes that we did actually landed upon the album when it came out. But that's another thing. So. Again, in a sort of similar way, you know, they were energized. They were doing what it took to get their careers off the ground, and they landed up trawling around London with their manager, with their demo, and they landed up getting signed to what was then BMG Records in 2002. By that point, I couldn't really get involved with the band because I had my own thing going on in Bristol, and I was working with a friend of mine who was signed to Virgin. He had a band called Ilya, who managed to get an album out with Virgin, and it did pretty well. It wasn't a chart success, but it did well enough to get some syncs. What we call syncs is where, like, you know, adverts and stuff and films use some of the tracks for background music or whatever have you. So I was busy with that, and I was also busy flying to Paris and working with a Ugandan chap who was signed to Peter Gabriel's Real World label, and that was kind of like world music. And obviously at that point, by then, I just had my first daughter as well. So I have a daughter and a mortgage. And so I couldn't really entirely get involved with Kasabian when they got signed in 2002. So I spent the next year through 2002 with them, just going up to Leicester to do more recordings, more drum tracks and stuff for their first album. And then eventually, in 2003, I kind of didn't really hear much from Serge and the boys. They were kind of finishing off their thing. They were working with different producers. And doing different treatments to different tunes off that first album. And then eventually in 2004, I got a call from their manager, again with only about like a week's notice. Can you come on tour for 2 weeks? And that was Easter 2004. And I had 2 weeks off. It was Easter break from the school teaching. So I was able to move some gigs around that I had in the book. And I went out on tour with those boys. And after the 2 weeks were up, it was very obvious that it was really working out. And then, you know, I've known them for a few years by then. I'd recorded on a lot of the tunes anyway. And I'd always loved the band and always loved them and the music. So, well, I decided to stay. And that's that's it, really. I mean, that's the start of a new chapter, I guess, really. Because then from coming from, you know, what I just explained to you about childhood and then making a decision to go professional as a drummer, then I embarked with a career with the band where we kind of did the same thing again, really. You know, the adventure that you have in a band like that is quite incredible, really. It's not all glamour and glitz. Even the week after we did that Glastonbury performance, we flew to Latvia to do a festival, and then we flew to Moscow to do another festival. This is all in one weekend. And then we flew to Copenhagen. So we were pretty tired by the time we got to Copenhagen. And then we were picked up by what we call the runners, the people who work for the festival, in a kind of a van, and bussed to the centre of Copenhagen to a hotel. And we all walk into the hotel, And at that particular time, our tour manager, who's usually always with us, had to go and do advance at the festival to work out what's going on. So it was just us. And we got into the hotel lobby and we're here. And they were like, sorry, you're not staying here. You're at our sister hotel, 20 minutes outside of the city. So we get back into these vans and we get bussed to the sister hotel, which is in the middle of a kind of a trading estate on the outskirts of Copenhagen. We then walk into the next lobby and we're like, we're here. And I'm like, oh great, your rooms are not ready. We can give you the conference suite, where we spent the next 3 hours using our hand luggage as pillows strewn all the way across the conference suite. So it's, you know, even though we've just done that the week before, it's like, feel the glamour, lads. You know, we're still like reprobates. You know, so you know, it's an interesting lifestyle. But you know, the thing is, like an act like Kasabian, you know, you start off small. You know, you have a tour bus maybe every now and again. You know, maybe you might. I started off. My role was to share a Travelodge room with the bass player. We did that for 6 months, and then gradually, as the band built, you gradually, you know, get to your own room, and then and so on and so forth. You know, but it's been an incredible adventure, and again, in turn, you know, new opportunities arrive from that. So the latest thing, you know, I've been now obviously with Kasabian since 2004. Since our first album came out in September 2004, and obviously I've got involved as a drummer. You know, then you start getting endorsements from big companies, Zildjian and DW drums and Vic Firth drumsticks and yada yada, and then you start doing drum conventions and stuff and meeting people. And the latest project I've been doing in the last year is I've been part of a brand new British drum company called the British Drum Company, building drums up in Manchester, and that's been again a new experience, nothing I'd ever expect I would ever do. I've never been to a drum factory before, you know, let alone having made them myself, my snare drum that I've brought with me today. Some of you are going to come and have a drum workshop with me, I believe. Is that right? I don't know. I built it myself, you know, and I'm involved in a manufacturing company, which is just something completely new. And now I'm representing that company, and I'm doing. I'll be doing drum conventions. I'll be doing the London Drum Show in November, and the Scottish Drum Fair, playing the drums, talking to people about the drums, being involved in that industry. Something I never expected to do when I was 19 years old. So, you know, you all know where you are in your lives. You know, you're here, obviously, this weekend, which is incredible. It's an incredible opportunity to come and, you know, hear people like me and some, you know, some great speakers you're going to have in a fantastic setting, and to help yourselves work out what you want to do in life and go and grab it. I swear, you know, I've never looked back. It was the best thing I ever did. As I say, I wasn't looking for that necessarily. That came by default, I believe, because I followed my heart, because I did something that mattered to me and that I was happy in doing. And I would tell you one thing, I would have been happy in failure, if you like. I would have been happy, you know, even today, being able to know that I can support myself and my family. I've got 2 children now, by me doing what I love most. And if you do that, if you do the same, then, you know, the world is your oyster. So go for it. Thank you.